Hi, everybody. I'm Leah.
I'm Mike.
And we are back once again to look at driving tests. How different countries test driving skills. We're on day 2. I have to say I have been driving in Taiwan for a number of years. And in many ways, I really enjoy it.
Really?
I tend to go by a phrase, 君子之道, which is to act like the gentleman on a road, to use the Tao of being a gentleman.
Okay.
And that means, you think about other cars, you make way when you can, you respect the cars that are around you, and at the same time, you don't give in too easily. So you don't just let people run all over you or go 20 miles in a 70 kilometer per hour space. But yeah, you try to be a bit of a gentleman when you're driving, and it works pretty well for me most of the time, even though I'm not always saying gentlemanly things while I'm behind the wheel.
Okay. It's interesting how many people rely on sort of Buddhist philosophy to be happy drivers in Taiwan. And I know another guy who takes his inspiration from Bruce Lee, the famous martial arts actor, and he says you have to be like water.
Yeah,
right?
it
You
works.
have to just flow around the traffic or flow around the dangerous drivers. Don't let them sort of block your progress in the same way that water flows around the rocks. It doesn't sort of bother with the rocks. It just gets past them and ignores them and carries on its own way. But it is an issue, right? We've been hearing a lot in the news about traffic safety in Taiwan. Taiwan was labeled a pedestrian hell by CNN, I think, last year. And other countries' governments have actually warned tourists visiting Taiwan that walking in Taiwan is a very dangerous thing to do because many of the drivers don't pay attention and are quite aggressive. And you run a real risk of being hurt in an accident. And it was funny because they said in every other way, Taiwan is a very safe country from crime and other things. But they did say that walking around for tourists can be dangerous because many of the drivers here in Taiwan don't follow the rules as much as they should. And when you look at how you get a license in Taiwan, and especially when you compare it to the countries we read about yesterday, the UK, Australia, it is very easy to get a license here. So I would say that maybe, we do need to improve the testing and the evaluation of young and new drivers to make the roads safer for everyone.
Let's take a moment now. We're going to listen to the entire article.
Japan's driver's license exam is known for its thorough and strict testing process. The most demanding requirement is to complete 10 hours of theory and 12 hours of practical training before the preliminary driving test. Furthermore, additional theoretical lessons, basic first aid training, and highway driving experience are necessary to lead to the final examination. Upon passing the final exam, candidates receive a certificate of competency from the school, allowing them to take the local center's driving test, which is mandatory to obtain a license. With its multi-stage process and low pass rate, the system aims to cultivate highly responsible and skilled drivers. In Thailand, the process to obtain a driving license is relatively simple and encourages people to fully utilize their right to take the driving test. The procedure includes watching a 4 to 6 hour traffic safety video, passing a written exam, and successfully completing a practical test that focuses on basic maneuvers such as driving straight, reversing, and parking. Moreover, the process is free of charge, and candidates can make unlimited appointments for re-examination if they fail, reflecting the local support and convenience provided. Interestingly, once obtained, a driving license in Thailand serves not only as a permit to drive, but also as an alternative to a passport when identification is required, making it an essential document for Thai residents. For many, obtaining a driver's license is both a challenge and an achievement. Understanding the worldwide driving test systems helps us comprehend the unique features of each country's examinations. This, in turn, helps us reflect on Taiwan's driver's license system and encourages the development of a more advanced traffic environment.
Digging into day 2, we have Japan's driver's license exam is known for its thorough and strict testing process. So now we've moved to Asia. Yesterday we were talking about, I guess Australia fits into that general range too, but we'll say we're heading into Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia for a bit. So Japan is where we're looking at now. It has a very thorough testing system, which means it goes through all the different steps very, very carefully, has a very strict testing system, which means it doesn't let you get away with anything. You have to really be on point when you're answering your questions. The most demanding requirement is to complete 10 hours of theory and 12 hours of practical training before the preliminary driving test. So the most demanding, the thing that causes the most effort or the most need for effort, the most exhausting, it could be physically demanding, it can be mentally demanding. This one is probably more in the mentally demanding area. It doesn't require you to use your muscles. The most demanding requirement is to do what? Well, you need to finish 10 hours of theory being like talking about, well, what happens in a situation where you're parked on the mountainside and you need to leave the car. Well, you need to put the emergency brake on, turn your wheels a certain way, so if the car were to go backwards, it would roll into the mountain and not into the traffic itself. And 12 hours of practical training, this is probably referring to training on the roads before the preliminary, so initial or first driving test.
Interesting. So again, like Australia, you're taking multiple tests here in Japan. So yeah, you learn the basic stuff at the very beginning, not too tough, 10 hours of theory, 12 hours of practical training. I think that's exactly what I did in Canada to get my full license. But here in Japan, I've only begun, as Leah said, the first step. And you also learn some other useful stuff. It says, furthermore, additional theoretical lessons, basic first aid training, and highway driving experience are necessary to lead to the final examination. So you can probably still drive with this preliminary license. We might also call this a learner's license in some countries. But then you get further theoretical lessons. Now, if something is theoretical, it's not practical. So this is more learning about driving as an idea, as a concept. Maybe you're learning more about how cars work, the actual mechanics of what's going on in the engine of your car when it's working, things like that. Not actual in the car, hands on the wheel, out on the road, driving around. This is more classroom learning. Here's a great thing. You learn basic first aid training.
Awesome.
What a wonderful idea. You might come across an accident or maybe even be involved in an accident yourself, and you have to be there to provide life-saving first aid to someone who has been hurt. And that, of course, could be useful in any part of your life, not
Absolutely.
just in driving. But if you're at the supermarket and someone has a heart attack, you might learn how to do CPR and stuff like that. So that would be a useful thing to have in your little knowledge toolbox. And then we also go out on the highway because, that's a whole other thing.
Yep.
And I think that's a problem in Taiwan. When you're learning, you don't actually go on the highway. So many Taiwanese drivers, the first time they drive on a highway is the first time they've ever driven on a highway. And it can be scary because, of course, the cars are traveling much faster. They're much closer together at high speeds. And you need to know how to drive safely on the highway. And unfortunately, here in Taiwan, people don't. You go at different speeds and different lanes. It's all very disorganized and dangerous. And most other countries that I know of don't do it that way. So that's somewhere else that we could find some improvement. Now, upon passing the final exam, so once you've done all that and passed your final exam, you're still not quite done. Candidates receive a certificate of competency from the local school, allowing them to take the local center's driving test, which is mandatory to obtain a license. So you still have to go back to either your hometown or where you're registered as living and take this other final exam, to take this local center driving test after you receive a certificate of competency. All right, a certificate is kind of like a license, but a more general term for a legal document, something that shows that you've passed something or achieved a certain standard of education or performance or something like that. You might get a certificate. You could think of a diploma as a certificate. Maybe when you were a kid, you took swimming lessons, and at the end of one of the classes, they would give you a certificate, something like that, something to hang on your wall or show people, look, I have this paper. It's got my name on it. I passed all my classes. This proves it. And competency is basically just showing that you're able to do something at a generally good standard, right? You're able to be a safe driver. You're not dangerous. You've taken the classes. You know the rules of the road. You've satisfied all the assessors and testers and things like that. So competency is just showing you have a good basic ability to do something. And all of that is required to get your license. And again, here the license is mandatory. You must have this local center driving test, and you must have this license. If it's mandatory, it's sort of like obligatory, which is a word we saw in yesterday's article.
Right. And as you notice, they're at a school normally to do that initial process. They're not doing that, at the testing center. So a school here is not like your high school or your middle school where you're training. This is actually a driving school.
Right.
Taiwan has a lot of this as
Similar,
well, where you can go and pay an amount and go to a driving school. My son did that in Taiwan, and he learned how to drive manual, which is the stick shift, which means instead of just putting it in drive and going forward, you have to shift gears a lot and use your clutch when you're driving. But he wanted to learn that in case if he later wanted to drive in Europe, where a lot of people do drive manual as opposed to automatic. But Japan is really kind of trying to cover all its bases, and that's why they're talking about this with its multi-stage process and low pass rate. The system aims to cultivate highly responsible and skilled drivers. Multi-stage just means it has more than one stage. It's not like you walk in, take the written test, and they hand you your driver's license. It has this preliminary stage. It has additional theoretical training, and then you have to go after you get your certificate from the school. You can then go and take the test. So it's a multi-stage process, not just one. And they say it has a low pass rate, which we haven't really talked about before with the Japanese test. But it sounds like it's a lot more difficult than we know, probably getting close to that Australian after 4 years, 50% pass rate or something like that. And the goal with that is to cultivate or to grow, to create, to raise into something these highly responsible and skilled drivers, people who have the ability to drive. We're going to come back in just a little bit, but first, let's take a listen to our Chinese teacher.
Hello everyone, 我是派老师。今天讲解的是暑期核干 Unit7 How Different Countries Test Driving Skills Day 2第2天的课程。这个单元带着大家更加认识世界，让我们了解世界各国驾驶制度到底差在哪里。要拿到驾照，要经过不同的程序。第1天课程介绍的是英国和澳洲。那英国的通过率很低，号称全世界最难拿的驾照，很多人都通过，应该说考过3-4次才通过。而澳洲则是相当的旷日费时，至少要4年的时间。今天的课程呢，带着我们看看，回来亚洲看看我们的邻国日本还有泰国的制度，尤其是日本，我们常常会听到人家说日本他们的交通事故呢，其实比率是相当低的。原来跟他们的驾照制度完整严谨是有关系的。好，我们一起来看学习重点吧。请同学看到第1段，也就是介绍日本的驾照制度。这里就说到日本的驾照制度呢，是全世界知名的。怎么知名法呢？原因是什么呢？就是因为他们测试的过程相当的完善严谨。Thorough, strict. 好，再来第2个句子 The most demanding requirement. 好，最费力的 demanding 这个形容词很重要，它所指的其实就是很费力很累很麻烦。其中有项要求很麻烦，就是你必须要上过10小时的理论课程，那之后呢，还要呢有12个小时这种实际的训练，才能够怎么样？不是拿到驾照而是经历第1阶段的驾驶测试。好，那再来第3个句子，我们看到还有其他的考试呢，还要再上其他理论课程，那也要接受急救训练 First Aid Training。那再来，我们看到第4个句子，在考最后这一关 Upon passing the final exam， 在考最后这一关通过之后呢Candidates receive a certificate of competency from the school。 这时候才从这个驾训班毕业而已，等于是完成了训练，还不是拿到驾照Allowing them to take the local center's driving test， 他才能够呢去接受官方的驾驶测试。那所以一定要有驾训班的结业证书，那这个一定要做 ，which is mandatory。Mandatory 就是没得选，你一定要做的。 我们可以看得出来，原来日本呢，他们也是有好多关卡的 with its multi-stage process. Multi-stage process 指的就是很多关卡、很多阶段的过程。
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back. So we talked about Japan, and now we've got Thailand.
All right, so we're sticking in Asia, but we're moving to Thailand. So let's hear how you go about getting a driver's license in Thailand and see how different or similar it is to Japan or even to Taiwan. It says in Thailand, the process to obtain a driving license is relatively simple and encourages people to fully utilize their right to take the driving test. So I'm imagining it's not going to take 4 years in the Australian model. Let's find out how it works. But we have to look at this word here, utilize. People are being encouraged to fully utilize their right to take the driving test. When you see the word utilize, you can often just replace it in your brain with the word use. When you are using something, when you are taking advantage of that thing in some way to make your life easier, you are utilizing. How do you get to work? Oh, I utilize the MRT system in Taipei. It's very, very fast and safe. I use the MRT system. So it's basically just kind of a more formal way of doing that, of saying that. So they are fully using or utilizing, taking advantage of their right to take the driving test. So how do you do it in Thailand? It says the procedure includes watching a 4 to 6 hour traffic safety video, passing a written exam, and successfully completing a practical test that focuses on basic maneuvers such as driving straight, reversing, and parking. This is kind of a standard driver's education program that I would recognize from 20 or 30 years ago. A lot of countries have kind of upgraded it and tightened it and made it much longer and safer. But this is kind of, pretty common. I'm sure there's lots of other countries that have similar systems. A procedure is just how you do something, a way of doing something, the steps you need to take to do that thing, to reach the end or reach your goal successfully. There's a procedure for at the airport, right? You go, you check in, you check your bags, then you walk through security, and then you go to customs, and then, these are the different steps and different parts of the process that you take of how to get on a plane. Here we're talking about the steps that you have to take to get a driver's license in Thailand. And the first part of the procedure involves watching a video, a 4 to 6 hour traffic safety video. I'm just hoping that the whole video, you don't watch the whole video at one time.
One round?
Because I would imagine a lot of people might fall asleep around, 20 minutes into it and then miss the other 5 hours. So maybe they
successful completing then.
Maybe they show it to you in different classes, or, over 30 minutes or an hour each time. But yeah, a lot of places they do this sort of theoretical teaching or classroom teaching in this way. And then you have to take a written exam to show you've watched the videos, you've remembered the information, you know the rules of the road and all that. And then it's time to get into the car, right?
Right, and you've got your practical test, and then you have to get your basic maneuvers under control. So your basic maneuvers. Manu is hand, but here maneuvers means moves, such as driving straight, which is a basic maneuver. If you're going to drive a car, you need to be able to drive straight.
It's useful.
Although beginning drivers a lot of times will find it difficult and they will move from one lane to the other without putting on their turn signal, without noticing they're doing it just because they're very nervous. Another basic maneuver is the need to be able to reverse. If you're ever going to parallel park, then you always need to be able to reverse. And in most situations, if you ever get yourself into a difficult situation, you need to be able to put the car into reverse and get out of it safely. Reversing is not as simple as it sounds. Sometimes you need to put your make sure you're going straight as you're reversing, not just as you're going forward, right? So the skill is learning how to reverse properly, and reverse just means to be going backwards, right? And parking. So parking might involve parallel parking, or just putting the car on the side of the road in any kind of simple way. The thing I like with Thailand is that it seems to go with the attitude of wanting to make it accessible for the greater public to get out there and get their driver's license. So it says, moreover, the process is free of charge. you don't have to pay for this process. A lot of countries charge quite a bit. I think Switzerland charges quite a bit through the process of getting your driver's license. And candidates can make unlimited appointments for re-examination if they fail, reflecting the local support and convenience provided. There's good and bad things about that. It's good for you to go in there when you're ready to, when you're not going to fail. So you've had enough practice and you know what you're doing, and then you go and make your test appointment. This one, it sounds like it's not as necessary for you to do that because you can always make more appointments for re-examination when and if you do not pass. Re-examination here means to take the exam again, right? And this shows the local support and the convenience, something to make it easier. They're making it easier for people to get their license. Interestingly, once obtained, a driving license in Thailand serves not only as a permit to drive, but also as an alternative to a passport when identification is required, making it an essential document for Thai residents. Same in the U.S. A lot of places in the U.S. now, you can get your real ID, as I mentioned before, and you can use that as a document, an official document to allow you to travel domestically. Of course, not when you're leaving the country. But yeah, this is just an interesting fact. That's why we say interestingly. Once obtained, once gotten, you can use this. It serves as not only a permit to drive, so something that allows you to drive, a proof of ability to drive, but also as an alternative, an alternate option for your passport when you need to show your identification. And yeah, that does make it very essential.
Yeah, I guess maybe in Thailand they don't have a national ID card like we do here. And I guess if you're going to be flying within Thailand, you could use your driver's license to get onto an airplane or things like that. Obviously, if you're flying from Thailand to Japan, you're going to need a passport.
Need a passport.
They're not going to accept your Thai driver's license. But within Thailand, it kind of works like a national ID. And I guess the other thing is a lot of these sort of developing countries like Thailand, they don't have public transportation options like we do here in Taiwan or in other more advanced countries. So, giving poor people a way of getting around, a means of transportation, even if it's on a scooter or a tuk-tuk or whatever, it really does open up people's lives and allow them to pursue education and career opportunities. So, when you don't have MRT systems and train systems and good bus systems getting people around in big crowded cities like Bangkok, I guess having more people.
Bangkok does have
Well, they
MRT,
do now.
right?
They do now.
The
But a lot of
BTS.
these, I think part of the reason Taiwan's driving education system is kind of old-fashioned is because it was set up a long time ago, right? When scooters were basically the only means of transportation for anyone who wasn't wealthy. But now, of course, we have more options. So maybe it's time to upgrade the driver's education system. And I think the Bangkok MTR system is still relatively new.
Right, BTS.
It's only been working maybe for 10, 15 years. But anyways, in other parts of Thailand, it would be the only way people can get around is to, have a scooter or maybe a car or a truck if they're doing a job or working. So that's why a driver's license is really useful for almost everyone in society. Back to the article, it says, for many, obtaining a driver's license is both a challenge and an achievement. Absolutely. It would definitely be a challenge and an achievement in Australia, for example. It would show that you've put in at least 4 years of your life to getting this thing. Understanding the worldwide driving test systems helps us comprehend the unique features of each country's examinations. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting cultural insight.
Actually, yeah.
Into the society's attitude towards safety, towards driving as a right or a privilege, and things like that. So these are definitely unique features that you'll find country to country. And it's always good to comprehend these differences between countries and cultures and how they go about doing things. When you comprehend something, you understand it. Basically, you understand what it means, what it's about, why it's that certain way. You might know a little bit of the history of it, but it basically means you're familiar with it, you understand it. It is knowledge that you are in possession of. This, in turn, understanding these differences between cultures, between countries and their driving, this in turn helps us reflect on Taiwan's driver's license system and encourages the development of a more advanced traffic environment. And I think that's what the government has been really focused on doing for the last couple of years. And I certainly feel that it's gotten a little bit safer, at least for people walking around the cities of Taiwan. I would love to get a little bit more, training in terms of highway driving in Taiwan because it's still a bit of a Wild West situation out there.
I have to say, as a last note on that too, for drivers in Taiwan, it gets quite difficult with pedestrians as well because a lot of pedestrians these days cross the roads with their phones in their hands.
Yeah.
So we talk about the danger for pedestrians, but there's also quite a lot of danger for drivers when pedestrians aren't watching out or maybe they're having a conversation right as they're supposed to go over the crosswalk, but they're not on the crosswalk. There's all these little things that for the driver, on the other side of things, for the driver, it can be quite a danger too. It's something I think we need to work on the sympathy for both sides. Definitely drivers have to watch out for pedestrians because a car is a weapon. It can hurt and do damage, whereas a pedestrian is not likely to do as much damage to the car unless they, pull out a baseball bat. But yeah, we definitely need to keep working on that on both sides. Let's take a moment now. We're going to listen to our Chinese teacher one more time.
再来呢是第二段了。第二段介绍的是泰国。泰国以什么著称啊？他们要拿到驾照的这个过程啊，其实相较于前面所介绍的国家是简单多了 ，relatively simple， 相对的简单。而且呢，泰国的考照制度好像很鼓励他们的民众多多的去尝试 to fully utilize their right to take the driving test。好，那到底考些什么？在第二个句子就介绍了，他会去测试你有没有足够的开车的这些动作操作的技巧，比如说让车子直行啊，懂不懂得倒车、停车等等。好，那第三个句子呢，介绍的是泰国驾照制度的特色，就是你去考照的时候是 free of charge， 不用钱。那而且呢，这些考生想要拿到驾照的人，他如果没有通过的话，并不是说一试定终身，还可以再考。They can make unlimited appointments for re-examination， 可以不断的重考。好，再来第四个，为什么这个驾照，泰国的驾照到底有什么特别的呢？原来啊，泰国的驾照也常常被拿来当做什么身份证明，就像我们的身份证一样来用。所以 once obtained a driving license in Thailand， 这个 once obtained 它其实省略了主词，一样是 a driving license。好，那省略了主词以后呢，你的动词 once a driving license is obtained， 这个 is 也要做处理啊，你不可以还保留这个 be 动词，所以我们才会看到 once obtained， 这就是副词子句的省略。好，这个驾照，泰国的驾照也可以拿来当做什么呢？不只是驾驶的证书，还可以是什么？护照的替代。那证明可以证明自己的身份。It's an alternative to a passport。好，那再来，我们看到第三段。好，第三段要请同学看的是第三个句子。好啦，看了这么多国家不同的驾照制度，这对于在于台湾的我们有什么意义，有什么影响呢？ This in turn helps us reflect on Taiwan's driver's license system。 那我们回过头来看，其实呢是可以好好的去反思台湾自己的驾照制度 driver's license system。 好，那反思以后，然后呢 and encourage the development of a more advanced traffic environment。 原来我们知道了解别人的时候，我们都说他山之石可以攻错，我们可以了解我们有什么不足的地方。好，那可以让我们进一步的去发展出比较先进的制度，然后让整个交通环境更加的安全。好，以上就是我们针对这个课程第二天所做的说明。See you next time.
All right, well, that's all the time we have. Thanks for joining us for this very interesting two-day look at different driving cultures around the world. We encourage you all to get as much driving education and experience as you can to go out there and be as safe as possible on the busy roads that we all must share. All right, before we sign off, we would like to encourage you to follow some other interesting topics that I'm sure you will find fascinating. So please check out one of our podcasts whenever you have some free time here at AMC. We always appreciate spending time with you and having you listen to us. Take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you back here sometime very soon. Bye-bye.
Take care.